of Economics and Finance Ministers of the European Union.
I think it's also appropriate to wish ourselves a happy new year, given what I would like to talk to you about, which has to do with the global economy and what we should expect for 2014. Now I'm going to test you numerology skills. By asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions, and I'm sure that you can compress numbers as well. So, if we think about 2014, all right, I'm just giving you 2014, you drop the 0, 14, 2 times 7. Okay, that's just by way of example, and we're going to carry on. So 2014 will be a milestone and hopefully a magic year in many respects. It will mark the 100th anniversary of the First World War back in 1914. It will mark the 70th anniversary, drop the 0, 7, of the Bretton Woods Conference that actually gave birth to the IMF. And it will be the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, 25th. Okay. It will also mark the 7th anniversary of the financial market jitters that quickly turned into the greatest global economic calamity since the Great Depression. The crisis still lingers. Yet, optimism is in the air. We've left the deep freeze behind us, and the horizon looks just a bit brighter. So my hope and my wish for 2014 is that after those 7 miserable years, weak and fragile, we have 7 strong years. Now, I don't know whether the G7 will have anything to do with it, or whether it will be the G20. I certainly hope that the IMF will have something to do with it going forward. So is 2019 going to be the year? I don't know, but certainly our policy recommendations is try to limit that growth of debt and move it down in the other direction, make it down, not up, in order to, facilitate your response to the shock that will inevitably come. In order to, facilitate your response to the shock that will inevitably come.
We will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.
Hey, come back here! This money ain't no good! It's US dollars! Absolutely worthless! US dollars! Absolutely worthless!
Videos. On October 9th, 2020, the Bank of Canada, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, the Riksbank, the Swiss National Bank, the Bank of England, and the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve and the Bank for International Settlements published a report for CBDC key requirements.
In particular, if a major country would launch a CBDC. And that's mentioned in the report, and that's another area for international cooperation. And in that area, I very much believe that the IMF should play an important role, given its broader membership and given its grasp on the macro financial dimensions of CBDC. So that's another discussion, and the IMF will be part of it.
Benoit is talking about if a major country creates a CBDC, there is a spillover risk, meaning that the rest of the world will use their CBDC for international transactions. He says that's a separate topic and one that the G20 is working on. He thinks the IMF should be the organization that oversees it. Do the IMF connections make sense now? On October 7th, 2020, Christine Lagarde publishes this video on the ECB's YouTube channel.
A potential introduction of a digital euro as a complement to cash, not a substitute, could also allow a public source of outside money to remain at the core of European payment systems. But it could also potentially challenge the role of banks in our financial ecosystem and potentially crowd out private payment solutions. So we are carefully exploring the benefits, risks, and operational challenges of introducing a digital currency. But this is high on the agenda.
The ECB is moving forward with their CBDC. They need to make a system that the innovators can work off of versus the central banks ruling all aspects of the platform. Now the ECB has 19 member nations that are all going to create a CBDC. As Benoit mentioned, there are spillover effects and risks. The international G20 cross-border aspect needs to happen before the nations move forward with their domestic CBDCs. Right now, a crypto asset could be utilized because the worldwide payment platforms have been updated. On October 6, 2020, Chris Larsen was interviewed on the LA Blockchain Summit.
What's Ripple's relationships right now with the Bank of England or other central banks or the Fed?
So we spent a lot of time over the years in very productive dialogue. Central banks have been actually terrific. It's so funny when I think this whole cryptocurrency thing began, everybody said, well, the central banks are going to be your worst enemies. In fact, I think they've been among the most constructive sort of financial regulators out there, maybe because they're dominated by economists, right?
The central banks have been on board all along. They knew the trajectory of the debt bubble and are eager to weasel their way out of it. We are waiting for the politicians to max out their credit cards before they start the reset. They can only push it so far until they hit a wall, and we are inches away from that wall.
We need to promote and embed a financial architecture that is fit for the challenges of tomorrow and that helps accelerate the transition towards a more digital and more green euro area economy. It is a challenge. It would be easy to revert back to our turf, behind our borders, and to assume that life will continue as it was. We cannot let a good crisis go to waste. We have to use it to be stronger the day after. Thank you.
Government time of universal subscribe before it's
the way we work, the way we buy and trade, but also the way we pay. Digital payments has really increased significantly. And in those countries of Europe, one that you know well, Germany, for instance, or Italy, where cash was king and people walked around with banknotes.
Project Sputnik recently showed up in the headlines that 100 banks have joined the R3 consortia. This consortia is built for the banks to automate reconciliation. This is a major update for the Italian banking sector. NTT Data is a Ripple partner pushing for Interledger Protocol, and R3 can buy billions of XRP for a fraction of a penny. And if any R3 consortia decides to use Corda Settler, they have the option of using XRP.
There is a significant change underway with much more confidence in digital payment. And as you know, the ECB is very seriously looking at a digital euro.
Nations will develop their own updated blockchain-based systems. These updated consortia and networks have the ability to send value with digital assets. CBDCs might be years away. Conveniently, the private sector is all set up to make this happen without the digital euro. If the digital euro comes out tomorrow, Interledger will be involved. The pipes have been laid and digital assets and CBDCs can flow through them.
So those are the domestic changes that we see that will entail structural changes in the way consumers behave, in the way they work, in the way they pay, in the way they shop.
Domestically, everything gets updated. What about the ECB when they need to send value to another nation? Japan isn't going to accept digital euros. Why? Because the central banks have poisoned their own fiat, inflated it to the max. This is where a trustless bridge asset comes into play. This is Project Stella. ECB and Bank of Japan are working on a CBD system, and they specifically mention Interledger Protocol.
Second thing, supply chains. That's an interesting phenomenon because there was great assumption that supply chains would all be shortened, that we would see a lot of reshoring or onshoring as opposed to offshoring. Well, based on studies and surveys that have been conducted recently, the results are the following. 60% of multinational companies say that they have responded to COVID by adopting more digital technologies.
There are R3 consortia that make trade efficient, adhering to the rules in real time without waiting. This breathes life into trade because it can happen in real time. Mail versus email. Emails are more frequently used because they happen in real time. I send out hundreds of emails a year, but only few letters. Prior to emails, I only sent a few letters. This is what will happen with trade. Remember, all of these consortia that are Corda-based can easily plug in Corda Settler. And XRP is one of the assets that they can choose for trade. Swift GPI is slow because it uses Nostro and Vostro. See email versus mail analogy.
So the rise of the robots that predated COVID is likely to be accelerated as a result. And almost 40% of those companies surveyed have said that they have diversified suppliers and sourcing countries, but only 15% have indicated that they have reshored or nearshored and therefore completely disrupted their supply chains. Interesting, too. Now, all of that is probably right as long as protectionism does not rise more than it has already up until now.
The rise of the robots. In a digital world, everything is going to be automated. Jobs will evolve, so prepare your children for a strong education in technology. We live in a globalized world, and the companies that are bringing jobs back to their nations are few. With digital technologies and digital assets, we have the ability to have a level playing field. That is what I believe is a catalyst for what is going on.
So you can see that there is a close connection between climate change situation, the air pollution, the concern that people have about the environment, and COVID-19. Again, this has operated as an accelerator and sometimes as a triggering factor.
I am going to be very careful on how I say this. I wouldn't want my channel to be deleted. She just connected the infamous illness and pollution. We are moving to a green economy.
You know, it's a fact that we cannot let a bad crisis go to waste, and that we have to take every opportunity to transform our society in order to tackle some of the issues that had been around because pandemic is operating as an accelerator of many phenomena that we had.
When we get to the other side of this, we are going to have a completely different financial system.
It's necessary because Europe has been lagging behind. When you look at the digital investment in particular, or the knowledge economy, there is quite a bit of ground to cover if Europe wants to be at least on a par with the United States, for instance.
Nations know this is a race. Nations are going to invest in companies to strengthen the internets of value to compete on the internet of value.
You know, you're right, Alfred, that I saw the writings on the walls pretty early on. And in the position where I am today, it's even clearer.
We pay close attention to Lagarde because she saw the writing on the wall early. And now she is saying it's even clearer. She is a central banker that is infamous in the crypto sphere for her stance on digital assets and blockchain technology. Now she is saying it's clearer than ever.
That payments and that the media of the currency will change, both. And it's not a fancy, it's not a tantrum. It is really something that is guided by consumers' preference. It is guided by Europeans' desire to actually not use as many coins and banknotes as they used in the past, based on their determination to effect payments in a digital way, in a cheaper way, in a faster way, in a more secure way. And I think that on all these accounts, a digital currency that falls under the ambit of a central bank is actually addressing all three issues.
On October 14th, 2020, Finextra reports that an EU commissioner stated a digital euro solution should not crowd out solutions that come from the private sector. In the ECB report, it is highlighted that such a solution would be complementary to the private sector's opportunities. There should not be rivalry or competition.
That are on consumers' mind and on European minds. It's not a 100% rosy story, because it clearly, number one, it's difficult and it's a time-consuming project. It's not going to happen overnight, if and when it is decided.
CBDCs are a time-consuming project. However, the private sector already has traction and they have allowed the plumbing to be built. They're on board. R3 has created solutions for CBDCs and can deliver to central banks.
Number two, if it has great benefits of being cheaper, faster, more secure, and responding to consumers' preferences, it also has its downside. And clearly we need to consider all the consequences that it would have, depending on the way it is tailored, depending on the way it associates our current, usual intermediaries, so that we don't disrupt the system.
They don't want average Joe six-pack to catch on. They're resetting the system, and they will remain in power. I own gold in case I am wrong.
But I think that it is here to stay with us. It's not implemented yet. Decision has not been made yet. We are still in the review and consideration stage, but we've just launched a public consultation so that consumers and Europeans can actually express their preference and tell us whether they would be happy to use a digital euro just in the way they use a euro coin or a euro banknote, knowing that it is central bank money that is available and that they can rely upon.
She's speaking of a retail CBDC, but what's going to happen first is a back-end CBDC called the wholesale CBDC. Platforms and banks can interact at the speed of digital currency. They're getting the masses used to the idea of digital currency. The masses will blindly accept wholesale CBDC or the reset with ease.
They have to be forward-looking. They have to be anchored into the medium term. My first concern at this point in time is that policies are tailored in such a way that we can avoid the cliff effect. In other words, the fact that some of the policies that were put in place during the pandemic, be it in the form of moratorium, in the form of guarantees, in the form of furlough or Kurzarbeit schemes, that they be stopped suddenly. So clearly what we hope policymakers will understand and will determine is that those supports have to be continued for a period of time, even as the recovery takes hold and even as the pandemic gradually phases out, so that there is a smooth transition into a full-fledged recovery. And not only a full transition into a full-fledged recovery, but a full transition into the other policies that will be put in place in order to support new activities.
The monetary policy, the fiscal policy, UBI, these things are never going to stop. CBDC is an instrument for them to keep this system going. The one world government is going to have all of the control through technology. Society is going to be surveilled. The average person is going to be living off of the bare minimum. Complete control is the end game. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. George Orwell.